Are you a people pleaser? Do you often say yes to things you don't really want to do, like going to an event you have no interest in, or taking on an extra project at work? Many of us struggle with saying no, even when we should. It's good to help others, but overcommitting has consequences. In this video, we're going to explore the art of saying no from the perspective of Stoicism. The Stoics were ancient Greek and Roman philosophers who believed in living a life of virtue, reason, and self-control. They understood how important it is to set boundaries and protect your time and energy. This won't just be a passive viewing experience. Throughout the video, we want you to actively participate by sharing your own thoughts and experiences in the comments. After all, learning to say no is a journey, and we can all learn a lot from each other. Before we jump in, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss our latest videos on Stoic philosophy and how to apply it to modern life. Now let's get started. The Stoic perspective on saying no. According to the Stoics, learning to say no is a matter of self-discipline, courage, justice, and wisdom. Let's break down what each of these virtues means in the context of saying no. Self-discipline is about having the willpower to turn down requests or commitments that don't align with your values or priorities. It's about resisting the urge to please others at the expense of your own well-being. Courage is the strength to stand firm in your decisions, even when faced with pressure or criticism from others. The Stoics believed that true courage comes from living in accordance with your principles. Justice is about treating yourself and others fairly. When you say no to something that would stretch you too thin or compromise your integrity, you're being just to yourself and to those who depend on you. Wisdom is the ability to make sound judgments and discern what's truly important. The Stoics believed that wisdom comes from self-awareness, reason, and a clear understanding of one's priorities. By embodying these virtues, the Stoics believed that one could live a life of authenticity, balance, and inner peace, and learning to say no is a crucial part of that journey. Now let's explore 10 modern life situations where it's best to say no and not be a people pleaser. When you're overwhelmed with commitments and responsibilities, we've all been there. Juggling multiple tasks, projects, and obligations, feeling like we're being pulled in 100 different directions. In these moments of overwhelm, it's crucial to step back and prioritize where we're devoting our time and energy. The Stoics understood the importance of living a simple, intentional life focused on what truly matters. They cautioned against overextending ourselves and spreading our efforts too thin. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." When you find yourself drowning in commitments, saying no can be incredibly liberating. It allows you to declutter your schedule and concentrate on the things that are most important and meaningful to you. For example, if you're a parent working long hours while also volunteering for multiple organizations, constantly chauffeuring kids to activities and trying to maintain a household, something has to give. Saying no to that latest PTA committee request could free up valuable time to be more present with your family. Or perhaps you're a dedicated employee who continually takes on new projects out of a desire to prove your worth. Learning to politely decline when your plate is full can prevent burnout and help you perform your existing duties with greater focus and excellence. The key is being honest with yourself about your limits and boundaries. The Stoics weren't advocates of pure self-denial. Their philosophy centered on living with virtue, reason, and self-control. Saying no allows you to live intentionally within your means rather than reactively overextending yourself. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, pause and reflect. Where are you potentially spreading yourself too thin out of obligation or people-pleasing? Having the discipline to say no in those instances creates space for you to prioritize your highest values and curate a life of greater simplicity and balance. When an opportunity doesn't align with your values or goals. In our achievement-driven society, we're constantly bombarded with opportunities, new jobs, business ventures, social commitments, and more. While some of these can be enriching, others may distract us from our core values and long-term aspirations. The ancient Stoics emphasized the importance of living a virtuous life guided by wisdom, justice, courage, and self-control. They understood that compromising your principles for fleeting pleasures or temporary gains comes at a serious cost to your integrity and self-respect. As Epictetus wisely stated, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Staying true to your authentic values and goals requires the strength to say no to opportunities that divert you from your chosen path, no matter how enticing they may seem. For example, imagine being offered a lucrative job that demands unethical or illegal conduct. The money is extremely tempting, but compromising your moral code could lead to disastrous personal and professional consequences down the road. Saying no preserves your peace of mind. Or perhaps you're an artist who receives requests to work on corporate projects that go against your creative vision and values. Politely declining allows you to invest your talents in endeavors that truly resonate with your soul's purpose. Even social situations like being asked to join a club or take on volunteer work that doesn't genuinely excite you may warrant a no. Each time you mindlessly say yes out of obligation, you sprinkle drops of regret that can eventually overflow into resentment. The Stoics remind us that the road of virtue is a long journey of self-discovery. Staying focused on your authentic values provides an inner compass to navigate life's inevitable forks. By mustering the courage to say no to opportunities that simply don't align, you prevent painful future regrets and remain faithful to your highest ideals. When being asked to do something that goes against your moral or ethical principles, maintaining a strong ethical code is challenging in a world that often tests our boundaries and principles. Whether at work, in social circles, or even with family, we may face requests that make us profoundly uncomfortable from a moral standpoint. In these moments, the courage to say an unwavering no becomes paramount. The Stoics believed that integrity was the ultimate form of wealth, more valuable than money, power, or status. They saw upholding one's virtues, even in the face of adversity, as a core part of living a fulfilling and honorable life. As Marcus Aurelius declared, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." For instance, imagine being pressured by a superior at work to misrepresent data, overcharge clients, or engage in other unethical business practices. While the temptation of potential rewards like promotions or bonuses may linger, saying no protects something far more valuable: your self-respect. Or perhaps a friend asks you to lie and provide them with a false alibi for a crime they committed. Refusing to enable their unethical conduct, no matter how long-standing the friendship, upholds your personal integrity. Even in family situations, you may find yourself urged to conceal unsavory truths or partake in behaviors that clash with your moral fiber. Having the fortitude to say no, while difficult in the moment, allows you to uphold your principles authentically. The road of upholding ethics is seldom easy. It requires bravery to potentially face judgment, retaliation, or loss. But as the Stoics knew well, true freedom comes from living with conviction aligned to one's values, not from evading what is morally right. Learning to say no with calm resolution becomes an act of courageous self-respect. When you don't have the time or resources to commit fully in our fast-paced, consumer-driven world, we're constantly fed the illusion that we can have it all and do it all. But the reality is, we each have very real limitations on our time, energy, and resources. Recognizing and respecting those limitations is crucial for our well-being. The ancient Stoics were firm believers in living within one's means and being content with what we have, rather than perpetually craving more than we can reasonably attain or maintain. They knew overextending oneself inevitably leads to strain, anxiety, and a lack of presence. Sometimes the wisest choice is to politely say no when an opportunity or request demands more than we can realistically provide without spreading ourselves too thin. It's an act of self-preservation. For example, as a working parent, you may be asked to lead a major volunteering effort for your child's school. While admirable, if your existing work and family obligations already consume your available time, taking this on could potentially lead to burnout, subpar performance, and resentment. Or perhaps you're presented with a business opportunity requiring significant financial investment. If your current resources are already stretched thin, saying no, despite the allure of potential future profits, safeguards you from going into unsustainable debt and jeopardizing your current stability. Even passion projects like hobbies, sports leagues, or community organizations we care about can become overwhelming if we lack the bandwidth. Saying no allows us to stay present and committed to the existing endeavors that bring us meaning and fulfillment. The Stoics knew that nobody can control every external circumstance, but we do control how much we choose to take on our own plates. Having the self-awareness to decline things that exceed our realistic capacity is a form of simple wisdom. It allows us to live within our means and pour our finite energy into what matters most. When you don't feel qualified or confident in your abilities, confidence and self-belief are powerful catalysts that can open many doors in life. However, the Stoics understood that true wisdom also involves radical self-honesty about our abilities and limitations. Sometimes the smartest move is to decline opportunities where we don't feel genuinely prepared or capable. As Epictetus taught, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Trying to take on roles, jobs, or projects that exceed our current qualifications out of ego, pride, or desperation rarely ends well. It sets us up for potential harm, disappointment, and failure. Imagine being offered a web developer role despite having minimal coding experience. While the salary is appealing, lacking the necessary skills could lead to shoddy work that damages your reputation and the company's product. Saying an honest no allows you to continue enhancing your abilities until you're truly ready. Or perhaps you're asked to lead operations for a major charity fundraising event. As someone who admires the cause but has never organized large-scale logistics, taking this on could result in a stressful, subpar experience that lets down donors and beneficiaries. Gracefully declining allows those better qualified to step up. Even in our personal lives, having the self-awareness to admit when we lack the knowledge or skills for a task prevents making situations worse through incompetence. Saying no to loved ones asking for complex legal or financial advice we can't ethically provide based on our limitations is wise. True self-confidence stems from an honest assessment of our strengths and weaknesses. The Stoics knew ego and overconfidence were the enemy of pragmatic virtue. By staying humble about our capabilities, we don't overcommit to roles that could jeopardize our integrity or reputation down the line. A polite no paves the way to continue growing. When you don't feel comfortable with a request or situation, we've all experienced that gut feeling, that inner voice that tells us something just doesn't feel right. Maybe it's a sketchy business proposition, an unethical request from a friend, or even just a social situation that rubs us the wrong way. In those moments, the wise move is to listen to our intuition and say no. The ancient Stoics were firm believers in logic and reason, but they also understood the importance of self-preservation and maintaining inner peace. They knew that some situations, if engaged with, could cause undue harm, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. Learning to respect your personal boundaries is key. For example, imagine being invited to a rowdy party where you suspect illegal substances may be used. Even if it's a tight friend group, putting yourself in an environment that makes you deeply uncomfortable out of social pressure rarely ends well. Saying no protects your well-being, or perhaps a coworker repeatedly makes suggestive comments that cross the line into sexual harassment. While it may seem easier to brush it off, firmly declining to tolerate such behavior is an act of self-respect. Your comfort is the priority. Even a simple request from a romantic partner to engage in an activity you find morally objectionable or degrading warrants an assertive no. Relationships should never make you compromise core values or boundaries. The Stoics spoke of the inner citadel, that unbreachable part of the self that must be fiercely guarded. When we feel that intuitive twinge of discomfort, it's our psyche's way of signaling that something threatens to disrupt our peace and well-being. Learning to firmly say no without guilt is a courageous act of self-love, when a request or commitment is not necessary or adds little value. In our fast-paced, opportunity-filled world, we're constantly being presented with new commitments to consider: social events, business ventures, volunteer roles, and more. While an abundance of options can be invigorating, it can also lead to overcommitment and a life of superficial busyness. The Stoics reminded us of the immense power in living a focused, intentional life, prioritizing only what adds true value. Seneca taught that life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future. When we mindlessly take on activities, projects, or obligations that don't genuinely excite us or align with our core purpose and values, we squander our limited time and energy on the non-essential. For instance, you may be invited to join multiple committees or social clubs out of social pressure, despite lacking a genuine passion for their missions. Politely saying no allows you to concentrate your community involvement on the causes that stir your soul. Or perhaps you find yourself taking on increasing busyness at work through joining random meetings, calls, or task forces that lack true relevance to your role or growth. Having the prudence to decline superfluous commitments focuses your efforts where they'll have maximum impact. Even simple social invitations to events, gatherings, or outings that don't deeply inspire you may warrant a no. While temporary FOMO, fear of missing out, can linger, protecting your time and energy for activities that are meaningful to you personally is ultimately more fulfilling. The Stoics were realists who knew our mortal lives were fleeting and precious. By carefully curating our commitments to align with purpose and passion, we amplify our ability to make the most of each irreplaceable moment. Mastering the art of the respectful no is a form of sublime life editing. When a request or situation is unfair or exploitative, while the Stoics preached acceptance of what cannot be changed, they also firmly believed in justice, treating oneself and others with fundamental fairness and respect. Sometimes protecting that principle requires the courage to say an emphatic no to requests or situations that are overtly unfair or exploitative in nature. The ancient philosophers knew that every human deserves basic dignity. Allowing others to take undue advantage by subjecting you to demeaning, unethical, or patently unjust expectations corrodes self-worth. Learning to speak up and establish boundaries is an act of virtuous self-preservation. For example, imagine an employer expects you to routinely work overtime without compensation under threat of termination. This demonstrates a fundamental lack of respect for your time, well-being, and the original agreed terms. Saying no reminds them to uphold justice and their end of the deal. Or perhaps a family member frequently takes financial advantage by borrowing money they have no intention of repaying. Declining to enable such exploitative behavior protects you from continual mistreatment. Relationships should have a basic fairness covenant. Even in social circles, a friend who always expects you to plan events, provide transportation, pay the full bill, or otherwise unfairly carry all burdens, warrants you saying no. True friendships are reciprocal and built on mutual consideration. The Stoics were not pushovers. They believed expressing needs for equitable treatment with backlash was an embodiment of self-respect and justice. While we must accept some inherent life difficulties, unfair imbalances or attempts at manipulation from others should be met with rejecting no. Finding that center of calm assertiveness aligns with virtue. When a request or decision lacks wisdom or prudence, the ancient Stoics were firm believers that virtue and reason should guide all our choices. They taught that acting rashly or making decisions that lack foresight and practical wisdom ultimately leads to negative consequences down the road. Sometimes the most prudent response is a polite but steadfast no. As Seneca wrote, "There is nothing so insupportable to a man as to be in an incurable error." When we're faced with requests or potential commitments that are objectively unwise, reckless, or ill-conceived from the outset, declining involvement is an act of foresight and self-preservation. For instance, imagine being invited to invest in a get-rich-quick business opportunity that reeks of being a pyramid scheme. While the lure of easy money is tantalizing, the wiser choice is saying no to avoid inevitable legal and financial ruin. Or perhaps a friend wants you to stand up and give an hours-long toast at their wedding, when public speaking is an acute phobia of yours. Saying no to this request, despite the sentimental factors, prevents needlessly subjecting yourself to crippling anxiety. Even relatively minor examples, like being asked to cram an unrealistic amount of tasks into a tight work deadline, call for pushing back with a no. Accepting endeavors doomed to be rushed or half-baked rarely ends well. The Stoics knew that while we cannot control every external circumstance, we do command our ability to make sound choices. Having the discernment to say no to proposals or situations lacking a solid reasoning protects our efforts from being ultimately wasted on the imprudent. Wisdom guides our yeses and nos alike. When a request or commitment goes against your personal priorities or life goals, we all have that inner voice that tells us when something just doesn't feel quite right. That gut instinct that signals an opportunity or request may be diverting us from our authentic priorities and deepest life aims. In those moments, the Stoics would urge us to lean into the discipline of saying no. The ancient philosophers taught that to live a truly fulfilling existence, we must dedicate ourselves purposefully to what matters most. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? They knew chasing every fleeting distraction ultimately leads to a dissipated, meaningless life. For example, you may be offered an exciting new job opportunity that on paper provides more money and prestige. Yet if taking it requires sacrificing your goal of achieving better work-life balance to be more present with family, it warrants refusal. Priorities over transient achievements. Or perhaps you're invited to join an elite social club or community board that doesn't align with your deepest values and passions. While the clout is enticing, Staying focused on investing your limited time in organizations that feed your soul's purpose maintains integrity. Even smaller requests from loved ones, like accompanying them on a trip during a crucial revision period for professional examinations you've been diligently preparing for, should give you pause to say no. Life goals require occasional difficult sacrifices. The Stoics had an unshakable appreciation for living life in accordance with our highest ideals and calibrated priorities. When the shiny enticements of circumstance risk pulling us off that centered course, powerfully yet politely saying no is true affirmation of our intentional, ethical journey. It prevents future regrets and recenters our efforts on what grant lives genuine meaning. Common mistakes to avoid when saying no. While saying no is a crucial skill for living an intentional and balanced life, it's often easier said than done. Many of us fall into common pitfalls that can undermine our ability to set healthy boundaries. Awareness of these mistakes is the first step in overcoming them. One frequent blunder is avoiding saying no altogether out of fear of confrontation, fear of disappointing others, or fear of missing out. Yet constantly saying yes when you really want to decline leads to overcommitment, resentment, and burnout. The Stoics taught that giving into fear rarely ends well. Another mistake is feeling overwhelming guilt when you do muster the courage to refuse a request. Yet, as Epictetus reminded, what is not nourishing to the soul must be avoided. Feeling remorseful for protecting your priorities and energy is irrational. Guilt becomes a shackle keeping you people-pleasing. Some struggle with lacking confidence when saying no, stuttering through excuses or rationalizations instead of stating their stance clearly. The Stoics embodied certainty by grounding themselves in reason. A polite but firm no spoken with poise is powerful. Others fail to prioritize and evaluate commitments with wisdom. They agree to everything in the moment, only to regret it later. The Stoics knew disrupting our core values for transient enticements leads to a hollow life. Not setting clear boundaries is another common mistake. When we have an ambiguous, undefined sense of our limits, telling where to draw the line becomes unclear. Distinct boundaries provide a foundation to say no with resolve. Finally, many struggle with communicating their no effectively without burning bridges. The Stoics were pragmatic philosophers. They didn't burn reserves needlessly. Kind yet concise language stating your refusal while validating the request itself can be graceful. Mastering the art of the empowered yet composed no is a lifelong practice, but recognizing the pitfalls to avoid provides a roadmap for doing so with wise integrity. It's the cure for the disease of overcommitment and regret. Conclusion. In this journey through the Stoic perspective on saying no, we've explored how mastering this oft-neglected skill is truly an exercise in living with virtue, intention, and personal integrity. The ancient philosophers knew that falling into the trap of perpetual people-pleasing and overcommitment ultimately leads to a life devoid of deeper meaning and balance. They taught that having the courage to decline requests or opportunities that don't align with our core values and priorities is paramount for curating an authentically fulfilling existence. From fending off unfair or unethical demands, to protecting our limited time and energy for what truly sparks our purpose, to upholding moral boundaries, respectfully saying no allows us to walk the path of reason with empowered self-discipline. Yet the Stoics also reminded that exercising judicious restraint was not about living a meager, self-denying existence. It was about applying wisdom to make room for what grants our short lives renewed vitality, joy, and virtue. Summed up beautifully in the words of Seneca, "It is a favorable circumstance that no person is so fortunate that there remains to them no direction for frugal behavior." As you continue journeying to live with steadfast principles in this chaotic world, carry the lessons shared here as guideposts. Have the courage to say no without guilt or remorse to what does not serve your highest aims. Wield discernment in accepting only what aligns with your deepest values and dreams. And perhaps most importantly, commit to being a student. Freedom lies in the eternal perseverance of striving to lead an examined life. For as Epictetus knew, only the educated are free.